Hello, my name is Argo Vermeer. Thank you for tuning into my YouTube channel, Collectivism Kills. Appreciate every one of you being here and your time and your attention. I know this is tedious and can sometimes be hard to listen to, partly because it's complicated and partly because I'm not the greatest orator in the world, obviously. So, today we're going to be talking about why science, and you'll have to pardon my colorful metaphors, as Spock said in Star Trek 4, why science is philosophy's bitch. So, yes, pardon my Western colloquialisms. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I do want to apologize. The last video I uploaded, I listened back to it. The first half was kind of convoluted and rather spurgy, as the kids say. And I apologize for that. It's the nature of how I talk. It's the nature of how I explain. And I've already admitted 1,000 times I'm not the greatest speaker in the world, and it can take me a while to get to the point. So I'm sure I lose a lot of listeners, 30 seconds in, but it is what it is. At this point, my age, maybe I'll learn as I go to do better. But at any rate, sorry about that. The first half was tough. It was spurgy, it was convoluted. Hopefully you gleaned some wisdom, some ideas that perhaps are interesting or different to you. I think the second half, where I was actually getting into the meat of what I was there to talk about, I think that was fine. I think that was fine, explaining why atheists are hypocritical when they morally criticize the Bible. Because, just to recap that real quick, just in quick summary, the whole point of that video was just saying that atheists, if they criticize the Bible out of their atheism, they're hypocritical, because atheism is a negative belief. It's a null intellectual position, meaning it doesn't stem from any intrinsic or inherent epistemological and therefore ethical frame of reference. It's an intellectual void. It's an intellectual vacuum. Atheism is a not belief. So it doesn't pull from any preconceived or any basis or any epistemological or ethical framework from which to make a criticism, which means it can't make a criticism. It can't say what actually is ethical, and therefore it cannot be in a position to say what is not. So you can't criticize any idea or any position from a disbelief. And atheists are also hypocritical if they try to criticize the Bible on moral grounds. If they appeal to what atheism usually means, which is just a word to a euphemism for a scientific determinist, one who believes in the fundamental causal power of ineffable and intangible laws of nature. These could be just the laws of physics, the laws of nature in general. They could be things like time and space, or gravity, or the processes of evolution, or electromagnetism, or whatever. The world of the quantum world we live in, where everything is reduced to properties, where there's no real objects. Everything is just a property that is rendered in some kind of mathematical unit. So it really doesn't matter. Typically speaking, atheists I've run into or I have experience with are usually naturalist, materialist, scientific determinist, those kinds of things. And the problem is that also obliterates human consciousness. So scientific determinism, by dint of determining everything, including man's mind, means that man in and of himself can have no ethical framework, because man can't actually apprehend knowledge. If your consciousness is determined by some force, some blind watchmaker outside of it, then it can't in and of itself be in a position, so you as the conscious individual, can't be in a position to actually apprehend any truth, and therefore can't be in a position to act in service to it, ergo to act ethically. So criticizing the Bible on moral grounds or calling God a hypocrite becomes in and of itself hypocritical in a self-deleting argument, because the scientific determinist could not tell you why hypocrisy is bad. They don't have any ethical frame of reference because their entire belief system is essentially determinism, which nullifies human consciousness or the singularity of self, which means there's no one to actually make any ethical claims. And therefore, how do you know, again, that there's anything wrong with God being hypocritical? You don't even know what morality is. So that was the point. And the other point, too, which I thought was a good one, and I thought was one that maybe people hadn't thought of, was that scientific determinists, which, basically atheism, all of your scientific naturalist, your new scientific priest class, your Sam Harris's, your, I think Brett Weinstein's an atheist, your Richard Dawkins's, your Christopher Hitchens's, your Sean Carroll's, he's another one I ran into this week. They basically, they give their gods, quote unquote, a moral pass all the time. They will tell you, well, yeah, humans, these aren't immoral men. They'll tell you that, yeah, you should act morally. It's better for us. It's more comfortable if we all try to get along. We don't steal each other's stuff. We don't commit murder. And we try to be compassionate. They'll tell you all this, but they have no objective ethical frame of reference. And so when their gods, quote unquote, do things that result in moral atrocity, I don't know, like a volcano obliterates thousands of people or wipes out a village, or an earthquake or a plane falls out of the sky, well, they just go, well, gods of the universe, these laws of nature, they determine what they want to do at any given moment, and who are we to judge? It would be the same argument Christians might use. Well, God's God. He doesn't necessarily have to abide by the ethical standards that he dictates to his people. Maybe in that sense, you could say Christian morality is relative. It's subjective. Maybe Christians don't have an objective moral frame of reference either, because their God apparently can do whatever he wants, no matter if it violates his own commandments for his followers. But this is absolutely no different than the scientific determinists giving a moral pass, quote unquote, based on their own utterly subjective ethics and morality, giving a moral pass to their laws of nature and the laws of physics, and it's just the way things are. And the gods, quote unquote, that govern our reality and our universe, well, they're not obligated to the morality they may set forth for us. We as human beings merely walk around in our subjective ethics, and these subjective ethics therefore cannot bind our gods or our God. So anyway, and again, here I am doing it again. But I wanted to give a brief, concise, understandable, more coherent, less spurgy, less rambly description of the atheist hypocrisy to their atheist hypocrisy relative to their moral criticisms of the Bible. I'm sorry, unless you, at the very least, profess an objective ethical framework, in this from an objective epistemological framework, let alone be able to rationally and consistently defend it. If your criticism does not proceed at the very least from a claimed objective ethic, then you can never be in the position to criticize anyone else's morality, period. And this is the hypocrisy of atheism, and atheism qua atheism, and atheism as scientific determinism. It's just hypocritical. They are in no position because they are no better. Their belief system literally offers you zero fundamental ethical difference. There's no difference between it and the very thing that they accuse God of doing in the Bible. So, at any rate. So, again, these are kind of free form. If you don't like sitting through the prologue and you feel like I get a little spurgy, I guess, this channel is not for you. Unfortunately, I would like it to be. I don't have many viewers or many subscribers. I do really appreciate those that are, but this is just the way it goes. And I have decided that I can't stress about how I sound to the audience or even to myself. So if I listen back and even I hate how I sound, like I did the last time, like the first half, I hated it. I was like, I'm not going to delete it because I don't know if there's something in there that somebody might listen to and glean something out of. There might be something helpful that, because I don't like the way I presented it, I'm going to delete it. It could be something helpful, and it could be something that someone wants to go back to. Maybe, for example, just hearing me ramble on about how you are not some kind of transient epiphenomenon as a conscious, singular individual self. Your conscious frame of reference is absolute, and it is infinite, and it is eternal. And by the way, I think Alan Turing shared this, who was a famous mathematician, brilliant mathematician, scientist, also, I believe at one point in his adult years, shared this belief that there was some eternal spirit that was infinite and that implied a body beyond this one, that there was an eternal singular self, I think he called it a spirit, that would imply that it would correlate with another body, not only here, but forever or infinitely. Now, again, I'm not an expert on Alan Turing. Maybe I'm taking that out of context, but the point being is that maybe this is something that's interesting for people to hear. Maybe it's helpful. Maybe people need to hear that your conscious frame of reference is an absolute. You don't have a frame of reference for you not existing. Everything you know about human existence, and even if you declare that you didn't exist before you were born and you won't exist after your body dies, the only way that you can make this claim is from the frame of reference of the conscious self. Meaning outside that conscious, absolute frame of reference, that absolute singular position, you don't have a frame of reference for not being. So you can talk all you want about the objectivity of oblivion after death. And you can talk objectively about how you didn't exist before you were born, but you can only do it from the position of your existence. Do you see? It's self-nullifying to claim that you were not, because your frame of reference simply is. So my point being, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. The point being, and if you disagree with me here, you're just wrong. I'm sorry you're wrong, because inexorably, the only way you can disagree with me is from the frame of reference of your conscious self. You don't have a frame of reference for not being you. To sit there and say you won't exist after you die, you can only make that claim from the position of your existence. So it stands to reason that you are and again, I don't want to go into the metaphysics. There's a longer explanation for all of that, which I find is very interesting, but is not germane to this video here. But perhaps somebody hearing that there is a quote-unquote afterlife, that your spirit is absolute, your singular self is an absolute. It's not a part of something, it's not a function of something outside of it. It's a frame of reference, it's absolute, it's infinite. And therefore, there is life beyond this body. You are not transient. You don't blip in and out of existence. You're not obligated to the laws of nature which govern you. You are not a function of some blind watchmaker. You're just some kind of epiphenomenon that just has this illusion of consciousness. That's all postmodern, scientific determinist, Gnostic, mystic bullshit. And maybe somebody might get something out of hearing that, even if it's rambly and sounds terrible and comes across as drivel. Maybe there's somebody out there that listens to that and goes, it's nice to hear somebody say that my existence is actually real and it's absolute. And that maybe I am here, really. And maybe there is something to this conscious self of mine, that I am able to perceive reality, that I am sort of a frame of reference, that I can know truth, that I can act in service to it. So I don't want to delete it, because even though I hate the way it sounds, and clearly most people hate the way it sounds because I have no viewers and I have no, not really viewers, nothing to view, but I have no real, I appreciate everyone I have, but you know what I mean, relative to YouTube, I have basically no audience, which again, I do this because I'm passionate about it, and I think it's important, and I love to do it. But The point being is that there could be even one person out there that might hear me rambling or going on about something, that they might glean something out of that even I don't notice, just because it's couched in a delivery that's not particularly organized. So I'm just going to keep it. My point being is that I did decide that I just wasn't going to delete things, even if other people hated it or I hated the way it sounded, because I can never know if of the 4 views I get, maybe one of the 4 views really got something out of that. Maybe one of the viewers or listeners got something out of it that's really meaningful to them and really helpful, and they might want to come back to, and I don't want to delete that. So I'm just going to leave it. Doesn't really matter. Like I said, it's not like I'm playing for an audience because I don't have one. So, all right. So let's get into what we're going to talk about today. I didn't really know how else to term this. How else to title this. It's not, sorry if that was loud. The microphone's next to my notes. Yeah, I didn't really know how to title this. There's probably a better, more highbrow way to do this, but I was out in the sun, a little bit more sophisticated or cosmopolitan way, a more genteel way of putting it. But I was out in the sun all day yesterday, so I'm pretty tired. So I just titled this, Why Science is Philosophy's Bitch. Sorry for the language. And again, I don't have any problem with science, qua science. Science as a methodology for conceptually organizing what man observes, organizing and quantifying, mathematically quantifying and measuring the relative existence and movement of objects in the observer's environment. Anyway, as a methodology for conceptually, as a kind of methodology, as a very effective, efficient, efficacious, and practical, useful methodology for conceptually organizing what man observes, I have no problem with science. Science is fine. It's great. It's wonderful. Clearly, I'm not a scientist. I'm not in a position to criticize the math. What I am in a position to criticize is when science begins to LARP as philosophy. When science decides to go metaphysical while pretending it's not going metaphysical. The idea of the entire quantum universe, where everything is reduced into mathematical values or mathematical units of various properties. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that that's not dealing in the metaphysical. I'm not going to be told that you're not dealing in the metaphysical when you have scientists that are trying to explain how everything got here, what consciousness is, do we exist or not? Do ethics exist? Is there such thing as morality? Determinism. And again, like I said, dabbling into the world of quantum mechanics, where you're not dealing with objects qua objects as we know them, because they're reduced to a level where they basically have no dimensions, so they have to be mathematically rendered. You're dealing in the metaphysical. And I have no problem with quantum mechanics or the quantum side of physics. I get it. It's completely fine. It's fine. I have no problem with mathematically rendering reality even on the level where it can't actually be observed as distinct things, more or less. I mean, fundamentally so. I have a problem when you say, oh, now we're going to extract fundamental meaning, value, nature, fundamental definitions, the origins of the universe. What is man? What is consciousness? Do we exist? When science starts going down these roads, that's where I do have a problem. Because these are not scientific propositions. You have now wandered into the philosophical, you've wandered into the metaphysical, and science has nothing to do with it and nothing to say about the metaphysical, because it's simply not, that's not what it's there for. That's not what science exists to do. It's not what science is capable or equipped to do. Science is not equipped to answer these questions. These are metaphysical questions. What is God? Coming at the question of God from the position of science is it's like an accountant coming to the position of carpentry and saying, by my accountancy, there's no such thing as carpentry because carpentry doesn't exist within the subject of accounting, therefore there's no such thing as carpentry. It's the same thing. A scientist deals fundamentally with the physical and the quantification and measurement of the physical. That's fine. It has nothing to do with fundamentally metaphysical propositions. Now, we could argue that the level of quantum mechanics is in some sense metaphysical because they're dealing with abstract concepts, but it's not really because they're still dealing with the mathematics of it. The mathematics are based on the physical world and the measuring of the physical world. You're transferring the mathematics, you're fitting these, the sort of, you're viewing material reality a different way via the mathematics. So you're creating new math to describe the physical reality that you can't directly observe. But the point being is that, I would argue, is not strictly metaphysical. When we say metaphysical, we're dealing with what is something, meaning what is its value? How does it correlate to the greater reality? How does this all exist? How did we get here? What is the beginning, if there is one? What is consciousness? What is existence? What does it mean to exist? So, and of course, what is God? What is the metaphysical primary? What is that which binds existence in its plural form? So how do you get a plurality existence? What's the singular infinite thing that binds the plurality of existence? What binds all things together in a single reality to where they can interact and affect one another? Seems paradoxical. It's not really, but it seems like it. These are paradoxical things, and these are things that philosophy and metaphysics exist to address, not science. So for science to declare a metaphysical proposition like God to be fundamentally in error and false is completely irrational. Science does not possess the tools. It is simply not equipped to answer the question, what is God? Because it's not equipped to answer the question, what is the metaphysical primary? Because the metaphysical primary cannot be quantified or measured by definition. It is infinite, okay? In a sense, it's infinite. So this is what's crazy to me. You're gonna let. It's like the carpenter allowing the accountant to tell them that carpentry doesn't exist. We would think that's nuts, but somehow when science says that God doesn't exist, oh, well, that makes so much sense. It doesn't make sense. That science, because it's not equipped and in a position to discuss God, has now become the new world religion, the supreme, the apex of human intellectual ability. Well, if God doesn't exist in science, God just must not exist then. You know, if accountancy is raised to the level of the most supreme of all professions, to which all other professions must be subordinate, all of its theories and all of its logic and all of its purposes and all of its meaning and everything about accountancy, everything must be subordinate to it. If it doesn't recognize carpentry, if carpentry doesn't fit into accounting, then carpentry just doesn't exist then. This is not logic. This is simply a function of one religion, one God. This is a function of somebody saying, my God is the real God, your God isn't. See, science is the new God. Science and their gods, the gods, they're, and I meant to say polytheistic, I said monotheistic last time. But science with its polytheism is simply saying your God is not the real God, our gods are the real God. Because the only way that science can criticize philosophy is if it does so from a metaphysical position, which it does do implicitly. Once science goes after God, it implies that it has its own metaphysical fundamentals, which makes it just an argument between religions. And it's just really, and because science is a Gnostic, or scientific determinism is the postmodern Gnostic religion of the postmodern West, all really science can do is say that my God is bigger than your God. My gods are better than your God. And then indulge in a whole bunch of doublespeak and contradiction and hypocrisy, and do so in a way where they trot out their high IQ intellectuals and blah, 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 and put on a good show and try to convince all the midwits that they're actually saying something when they're not. So, yeah, and I'm more and more convinced that these celebrity physicists, these celebrity mathematicians, these celebrity atheists are simply out there to convince the midwits that there's this really special, highly intelligent intellectual class that just knows things that the blind masses can't know. And we're dazzled by their intellect. We're dazzled by their big word. Listen to Brett Weinstein talk about, go on the Piers Morgan, Sean Carroll interview and listen to Brett Weinstein talk. Now, people say, well, he's not talking to the audience. He's trying to make himself sound smart so he's trying to one-up Sean Carroll. He's trying to make himself seem like he really knows these physics, the physics of which he speaks, and therefore people like Sean Carroll must take him seriously. I don't know. I'm more of a cynic than that. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go check out that video, the Piers Morgan, where it's Sean Carroll versus Brett Weinstein, and you'll be caught up to speed to where you'll understand where I'm coming from here. But I don't think so. I think Brett is talking to the masses. I think he is. I think he is talking to the audience. Implicitly so. I think people like Brett Weinstein, what they're trying to do, he knows the kind of people that watch Piers Morgan's show. And again, I don't want to insult anybody. But the kinds of people that are going to watch things like Piers Morgan and the O'Reilly Factor, if you remember that show, these kinds of news shows, I'm just going to stop there. We know the kinds of people that like that. The boomers are really into these kinds of things. My parents, my in-laws. I mean, my point is again, I hope I'm not offending anybody, but my guess is if you're listening to me, you're not one of these people anyway. If anyone's listening to me. But my point is, I think Brett Weinstein exists to convince the midwits that there are people out there like him that are really, really smart, and they just know stuff that you couldn't possibly know. And there must be, therefore, this enlightened science class, this enlightened group of high IQ scientists and mathematicians that just possess this knowledge, this apprehension of the universe and reality, and can express it in a way that you could never express it, and understand it in a way that you could never understand it. And I don't know anything. Oh my gosh, I really should listen to people like this, because look how they talk. They're talking about things that I know I could never relate to. Clearly there must be an enlightened sort of science class out there, and clearly these people are so smart, and maybe, just maybe, they should be the ones that are telling me what I should think about everything. That's what I think Brett Weinstein does. That's what I think he's there for. I think he's there to convince the midwits that there is a cadre of really, really smart scientific philosopher kings who should basically be in charge and sort of be able to dictate truth and reality to every one of us, because they're just enlightened. They are just more enlightened. It's just by evolution has just decided, for a reason we can't understand, to make these men much more knowledgeable than we could ever be. That's what I think he's there for. The fact of the matter is conceptual consistency, rational consistency is available to anyone who is conscious and who does not have a bona fide clinical cognitive deficiency. So don't let them tell you not to believe your lying eyes. You can see a contradiction 1,000 miles away once you know to look for them. And I'm sorry, I don't care if it comes from Brett Weinstein or the Pope or the man with the 200 IQ. Doesn't matter. If it's a contradiction, it's false. Period. So if they try to tell you that the universe came from nothing, that's a lie, because you don't get something from nothing. That's a contradiction. What they're telling you is they don't know where the universe came from. If they use terms like the beginning of time, it's a lie. There can be no such thing as the beginning of time, because time is the beginning by definition. You don't have a beginning to time, because without the beginning, without time, there is no beginning to time, which means there's no time, which means time never occurred. You understand that without time, time can't ever have happened. So, for example, if time and space didn't exist until after the Big Bang, and I'm pretty sure the physicists are probably modifying their theories now, because it takes them like 10 generations to finally run into the obvious contradiction and go, oh, Well, maybe the Big Bang wasn't the beginning of the universe. Maybe there was something before. Maybe there's multi-universes out there. Maybe we came from something else. Yeah, you know why they say that? Because if everything started at the Big Bang, then it never happened and it happened nowhere. So if time and space didn't happen until after the Big Bang, then it didn't happen anywhere at any time, which means by definition it shouldn't exist. So the point being is I don't care who tells you these things. 2 plus 2 is not 5. 1 cannot equal 0. Left is not also right from the same observational frame of reference. They're going to try to tell you, just believe us, man. 2 plus 2 is 5. If you really understood quantum physics, you'd understand a 2 plus 2 can be 5, man. If you understood taxicab geometry, trust me, bro, you can have an is and an is not at the same time. Trust me, something can be and not be. No, it can't. The reason why the scientific community peddles these contradictions and tries to get you to believe that the reason you don't understand them is not because they're contradictions and there's nothing there to actually understand, but because they're so smart and they're so much smarter than you. The reason why is that these people are terrible, terrible metaphysicians. They don't think rationally, they think mathematically. They think within the parameters of mathematical rules, which, by the way, are infinite. Because when you're parsing one, you can parse it in an infinite number of ways, which is also why it seems like they can come up with any math to explain anything, because, again, mathematics is really just parsing units of infinity and fitting them together in ways that fit the overall objective, that describe what they wanted to describe. Which, again, is fine. I'm fine with that. But it's not philosophy. It doesn't explain the truth, nature, or value of the thing. It's just a conceptual way of organizing it. So yeah, these scientists are like Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and Brett Weinstein. They're terrible philosophical thinkers, and they're not particularly good rational thinkers. When you peddle contradiction as truth, and you tell me to believe it because you're really good at math, that doesn't tell me that you're smarter than me. It just tells me that you're not a rational thinker. You're a scientific thinker. You're a mathematical thinker, which is great. But you don't have anything to say to me. You can't answer any of the really interesting questions, like the character said in the movie Red Planet. Scientists can't answer any of the really interesting questions. But see, these are really nerdy guys. And nerdy guys are kind of outcast. And the nerdy guys they weren't really the cool kids. And so the way that they rock themselves to sleep at night is by telling themselves they're smarter than everybody else. And so to be smarter than everybody else means they have to have the really big answers. You have to have the really big answers. And so you have to have all the answers to the really interesting philosophical questions. But these guys aren't good at philosophy. And I shouldn't say, I don't know that they were all nerds and stuff. But I mean, if you look at them, look at all these people. Look at all, and I'm kind of a nerd too. Look, I'm not anything to look at. I'm not like a young David Gilmour either. But I'm just saying, look at them. I mean, do you think these people don't love just believing that they're just so much smarter than everybody else? I mean, it's what they got, man. It's really all they got. There's a few that actually invented something, and they pioneered something great that's really actually helped mankind. And, the scientist who, or the engineer that creates the first airplane, or puts to practical use radio waves, or, creates the steam engine. Those people are awesome. But these, theoretical physicists and stuff, I mean, they pride themselves on needing to be smarter than everybody else. They pride themselves on needing to have the really answers to the big questions. And if they don't have the answers, they pride themselves on telling you that those answers just don't exist. Because if they existed, well, they're so smart, they would know them. Right? But anyway. All right. So I hope this is not too rambly. But again, like I said, somebody might be taking something out of this. That's good. So, all right. So I'm going to go through my notes here, and then we'll wrap this up. And hopefully this won't be too long. Okay, so why is science philosophy's bitch? Well, science by its nature, and I mean that tongue-in-cheek because they're not related. They're related, certainly, in some sense, I suppose. Well, you know what? let's just say they're not. I don't necessarily think. I think that to think metaphysically or to think philosophically is different than thinking scientifically. So we're just going to go with that. I'm sure there's overlap, of course, but there's overlap with everything. So, okay, so science by its nature is not and cannot be in a position to declare, meaning to define or to describe what anything truly is. Like, what is man? What is a flower? That's not what science does. Science, and this is going to rub some people the wrong way. This is going to be scandalizing and surprising because some people think this is exactly what science is supposed to do. Science exactly answers these. What is man? What is existence? What is a flower? It's not. That's not science. That is not science. Science can't answer the fundamental question, what is a flower, qua a flower? That's a metaphysical question, not a scientific question, not a physical question. So, science is not in a position and can't be and is not equipped to answer, to declare, to define, to describe what anything is, and therefore it is not in a position to describe can't say what anything is, and therefore why it is, and therefore how it is. How something is, why it is, and what it is are metaphysical. They are philosophical questions. Only after those questions are answered does science matter. You can't quantify a thing, you can't measure a thing until the thing has been defined and described philosophically, metaphysically first. Meaning it has to have a practical, valuable existence in the eyes of the observer before measuring it is meaningful, before quantifying it is meaningful. Science doesn't have any value at all until after you've done your philosophical homework. Period. All science does and can do is describe objects in a very particular way, in a very particular sense, meaning science quantifies. It mathematically measures. It measures and mathematically renders how objects exist or move relative to their own parts and their environment. It is a way of quantifying, in this sense, conceptually organizing mathematically what the observer observes, how it exists relative to its own components, to its own parts, all the way down to the quantum, fine, and relative to other objects in its environment. Okay? That's all science is. That's all it does. It is purely descriptive and only particularly so. And it has no relevance or meaning until after the philosophical homework has been done. Or at the very least, you have to acknowledge that there is an aspect, there is the philosophy part, which you have to accept as a priori, even if you don't understand it or describe it. You have to at the very least accept that there's the philosophy part first. You'll take it as a given. Something exists and you exist. The observer is real and he's utterly distinct from that which he observes. If you can at the very least accept that axiomatic premise, that necessary a priori premise, that the premise that you must accept before doing any science, then you're probably fine. If you can just admit to yourself, the observer exists as an individual, singular, conscious self, and is utterly distinct from that which he observes at the metaphysical level, and therefore is not a function of any of the forces or the mathematics we use to describe what we observe, then you can do science. But the point is, until you have done the philosophical homework, there is no science. And you have to differentiate the observer from the observed. They can't be a direct function of one another because then there's no observer and there's no observation. And I know what they're going to tell you. Yes, you can have observation without an observer. Yep, just like you can have time without objects in time. You can have gravity without an object which has gravity. You can have evolution without any object actually evolving. This is all mysticism. All this kind of stuff they're going to tell you, this is all contradiction. It's all bullshit. It's all because these physicists, these scientific minds, they desperately want to become the new priest class. So they come at you with this Gnostic, contradictory bullshit and pretend that you should accept it because they're so much smarter than you. And the scary thing is that a lot of them actually believe it. So, science is purely descriptive, and particularly so. Now, here's the thing. Science cannot and does not describe value. And this is why, and it can't describe value. This is why when you ask an atheist, and when you push an atheist, and when you push a scientific determinist, an advocate of scientism, onto their ethics, they will tell you that there is no such thing as objective morality or any objective ethics at all. And this is because science is incapable of describing or dictating or defining value. There is no value to anything that is, there is no value to anything scientifically described. And this is why science utterly fails as a proxy for philosophy. This is why scientific determinism fails, because it is entirely ethically subjective. Incidentally, and perhaps, maybe not, perhaps ironically, it's also why many organized religions fail, because they also present themselves as supremely morally relative and epistemologically relative or subjective. God occupies a position so far ethically and epistemologically superior to man as to have nothing to do with man's. So man's sense of the truth and man's sense of ethics are in no way compatible with God's, which makes man, because man is subordinate to God, utterly beholden to completely subjective, utterly, ultimately, fundamentally subjective epistemology and ethics relative to God. So again, to give the scientific determinists and the atheists a pass, Christians also do this. That's why I'm no longer part of any organized denomination, because their metaphysics are also screwy. Now, when I read the Bible, I don't read into it. I don't extract from it the doctrine that my other Christian brothers and sisters do, which is why I'm still a Christian, because I realize the Bible's not actually saying what they're telling me it's saying, or in other words, that the description of God and his Christ, as laid out systematically in the Bible, is actually much, much, much more metaphysically rationally consistent and points to an objective epistemology and ethics that both man and God possess. You could say, well, that's convenient, Argo. That's real convenient for you. Perhaps. Perhaps. But you might also say to the atheist, well, I just ran away from religion. Well, did you bother actually? Did you bother thinking? Did you bother examining whether or not the doctrine that you believed that you had a problem with was actually what the Bible was saying? Or did you just believe when you read the Bible, according to your particular doctrinal interpretive lens that you learned in church, did you just assume that the Bible was saying what your pastors and your church leadership were telling you it was saying? Did you even think that there might be a distinction? Did you even think that maybe the Bible's not the problem? And that perhaps the doctrine is the problem? Or did you even think that maybe you should examine the Bible and go, well, what's the holistic picture here? Maybe there's things in the Bible that are contradictory, but if I take the Bible, or I can extract out the fundamental meaning, the philosophical and metaphysical meaning that the Bible is laying out, maybe there's things in the Bible that, don't make a whole lot of sense, but if I look at it sort of, if I kind of examine these premises, biblical premises, and what they're actually trying to say or fundamentally are supposed to mean to me, that maybe this is much more consistent and rational than I was led to believe. Did you even bother to ask yourself those questions? Or did you just say, fuck it, I'm going to go become an atheist because, this God must be a lie. Oh, and I read a Richard Dawkins book and decided that, he's so smart. Well, I might say that's convenient. Well, it's convenient if you just become an atheist and you don't actually have to do any work. You just go, you know what? I got hurt in the church. It's wrong. It's all wrong. I'm going to go be an atheist. Clearly, the church is clearly God's a lie. That might be convenient for you. So you could say, oh, that's convenient. You get to have your cake and eat it too, Argo. You get to still be a Christian and not have to go to church. Maybe it is convenient. I don't think it is. I'd be happy to debate and discuss the question with somebody. But I could also argue that becoming an atheist is much more convenient because the way I did it required me to actually examine some stuff. I had to examine the doctrine. I had to look at the doctrine and go, well, that doctrine is a contradiction. Is that what the Bible is saying? Oh, the fall of man is never actually mentioned in the Bible anywhere. The idea that man is utterly incapable of apprehending truth and acting in service to it until God saves him, for reasons we can't understand. Oh, that's not actually in the Bible. Huh. See, I actually had to do a little bit of thinking to arrive at my conclusion. And I'm not saying that people who become atheists don't think. I'm just saying the way I did it wasn't quite so black and white. It's much more convenient to look at things as all bad and all good. Oh, I got hurt by the church. Oh, there's something the Bible said I didn't like. Oh, I read a Richard Dawkins book that told me that the universe is run by a blind watchmaker. Oh, God bad, Christianity bad, religion bad. I'm going to atheism. Atheism good, you know. So, yeah, I would just argue that the way I did it was probably a little less convenient. But anyway, I'm shadow boxing here with nobody. So, anyway, okay, so science cannot describe value. Okay? Okay, and this makes any scientific description of an object fundamentally irrelevant in and of itself, outside the philosophy. Meaning that if science can't describe value, then science's description becomes fundamentally worthless in and of itself, outside of the boundaries of a philosophical or metaphysical framework, okay? And this is because the description of what a thing is correlates to its value, to the observer. So in order to rationally and efficaciously and relevantly understand or describe what a thing is, you have to know what to do with it, either conceptually, cognitively or physically. You have to know you have to have the knowledge of what that thing is, and then you have to know how to apply it. That's its value. That's all ethics is. Ethics is not this big, scary philosophical category that's really subjective and relative. It's not. It's a natural corollary to epistemology. It is, oh, now that I know what's true, I can know how to act. I know how to act in service to the truth. The truth has value. It shows me how I should behave because the truth will lead to benevolent or good outcomes. That's acting morally, acting in service to truth in a way that promotes the observer, as he is rationally metaphysically described, which we won't get into here. That's all ethics is. Ethics is simply the value of knowledge or the value of truth. How do you apply what you know? You can't apply a description or knowledge if there's no value, you see? The value is the knowledge must have some efficacy. There must be a way to apply it. This is the whole problem with Hume's law. That's why Hume's law is bullshit. There is no is without the ought. You don't get an ought from an is. Without the ought, which really should be shall. See, the problem is if you replace Hume's ought with shall, well then it's a whole different ball game. You don't get a description. You don't get an is without a value to it. You can't say what a thing is unless you can say how you act and serve it, how you're supposed to act in service to the knowledge. If there's an objective description, then there's an objective application. You don't get the ought without the is, or the shall without the is. That's why the biblical commandments are rendered in shall, not ought. Meaning, if you are going to act in service to the truth, and the truth is actual objective efficacy, then this is how you should objectively apply it. That's objective ethics. It's very, very simple. To apply truth in a way that contradicts its objective value leads to bad consequences for the observer, observable, measurable chaos, or negative consequences. It's very, very simple. It's very simple. So, without any value, the description is irrelevant. So, if science is describing something without a requisite or corollary value, then the scientific description is meaningless, which is why science, qua science, is a terrible philosophy, because it can't describe value, it can't define value, because it rejects consciousness, so it rejects the ability of man to actually apply what he knows. The idea that you know something but can't apply it, either cognitively or physically, is a contradiction. So if science can't describe value, then it can't describe knowledge. Its description is meaningless. This is why science's philosophy morphs into Gnostic mysticism. It has to be a function of divine knowledge that only people like Brett Weinstein have. They just dictate to you how you should act and what you should know because you can't know it for yourself. And the only reason they know it is from just magic, just chance, just the laws of probability. They just were born smarter than you. They can't, and they might be able to tell you, but you wouldn't understand it. You're not smart enough to understand because you'd have to be enlightened like them by the divine gods of science. So even if they wanted to explain it to you, you couldn't understand. That's Gnosticism. That's science as philosophy. So without any application of truth, without any application or value to the description is irrelevant. And science has no value. And that's what I say that's what I mean when I say science can't explain what a thing actually is. Science can't tell you what something is because the description is invalid because there's no value to scientific definition. It's just a measurement. It's just a quantification. It doesn't go beyond that. The universe comes from infinity. It goes to infinity. It is governed by infinite processes. Evolution qua evolution. Gravity qua gravity. Energy qua energy. Time qua time. You see? So there's no value to infinity qua infinity. All right? So, and I put it this way. Without a value distinction, there's no practical distinction. And if there's no practical distinction, then you can't be conscious of anything. So if you're a scientist, there's nothing, if you have no value, you can make no rational or relevant distinction between things you're observing and measuring, which means you can't actually observe or know anything that you're observing or measuring. Do you see what the point being is that if you can make no value, if you look at two objects, object A and object B, and you can make no value distinction, there is absolutely no relevant difference in the way you should apply A or B. As far as you, the observer, are concerned, it's meaningless because you, the observer, are an epiphenomenon. You're not really here. So it doesn't make any, so the application of your knowledge of A and B, it's irrelevant. Doesn't matter how you apply each one of them. The application sums to zero as far as you're concerned because you, the conscious observer, don't really exist. So the observer is not able to make a value distinction between A and B. That makes the physical distinction irrelevant. If there's no objective way for you to apply A versus B, then A and B effectively become indistinguishable from one another. There's no fundamental difference between either one. Their value is identical, which means there's no value. The application is exactly the same for both because the application, as far as you're concerned, sums to nothing. So you can make no value distinction between A and B, which means there's no real practical distinction, which means you're not really observing either one of them. You see? So again, if there's no value distinction between this object and that object, then there can be no fundamental relevant practical distinction, which means you're not really observing any distinction at all. You see? And this is why science has to tell you that consciousness is a lie. Because this is what science implies. Science implies this. Science implies that there's no actual value distinction between A and B. And therefore, there's no practical distinction between A and B, and therefore there's no distinction at all. And it's not because they'll tell you that the science is philosophically defunct. No, they won't admit that, okay, science is not in a position to describe the value of things, and therefore it is not in a position to describe what anything actually is, and therefore it can't describe how it got here, where it came from, where it's going, what is man, what is consciousness, all these conceptual things, all these non-material things. Anyway, I'm starting to get tired, so I'm getting a little convoluted in my thinking here. But the point being is that science will tell you it's not that we're not in a position to proclaim philosophical truths. It's because your consciousness is an illusion. They won't. You see what I mean? Well, scientists will go, well, we can't make a value distinction between A and B, and therefore fundamentally there can be no practical distinction, which means we're not actually observing or measuring anything. We can't, so science won't go, oh, well, maybe there's something wrong in our philosophical thinking, and maybe science is not useful as a philosophy because clearly if we try to make it a philosophy, it nullifies to zero for this reason. No, instead what science will do is just go, oh, well, consciousness must be an illusion. It's an epiphenomenon. It's kind of here, but it's kind of not. Ultimately, it's nothing. It's meaningless. You're not really you. I'm not really me. This is so instead of these people just having the humility to say, yes, science is not philosophy. And if we try to make it a philosophy, it'll be a really, really shitty and violent and tyrannical one because it'll just be some version of Gnostic mysticism, which always sums to violence and chaos. They're so arrogant they can't admit this to themselves. So they just have to come up with theories of what is consciousness. Consciousness is a function of waveform properties, and consciousness is an epiphenomenon. And we're not saying it's not here, but it's kind of an epiphenomenon, which means it's sort of transient and it's kind of here, but it doesn't really affect anything in reality. You know, they have to kind of do these gymnastics to try to convince you that they actually can express to you deeper meaning. Philosophical truths, metaphysical truths, or explain to you why there's no such thing as philosophical truths and metaphysical truths, and try to get you to believe this and also, ironically, value this kind of information. So, wow, I talked a lot longer than I was going to, but I guess I was in a good mood today. So I'm going to wrap it up here. So I hope this was helpful. I hope it was better than the last one. I don't know. I'm not a great speaker. I don't know that this is really going to get many views or anything like that. I hope it's interesting. I hope that a handful of you think it's interesting. Anybody who finds any of this helpful or interesting, I thank you. I thank you for your time, and I thank you for your attention. And all I can do is hope that you gleaned something from this that you found helpful. So having said that, I'm going to be done. And until next time, when I'll have another short upload that'll morph into an hour, I will talk at you later. So, okay. Feel free to share, like, subscribe, comment, and not if you're going to say something mean. If you're going to say something mean, don't comment. I don't need comments that much. I'm fine with nobody commenting if it's just going to be mean. Critical is fine, but mean isn't. And don't lie. Don't lie in the comments. You know, people lie. Not that anybody listening at this point would. So anyway, all right, that's it. I'll talk to you later. Take care. Bye.